my sense of anxiety was very similar to the sense of anxiety that I had about Mary Poppins Returns. And it is partly because I had thought so absolutely that the Toy Story trilogy was a thing, that it was an arc that had, however organically it had grown up, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And unlike things like The Godfather, in which, 1 and 2 are great and 3 is very flawed, it's very, very, even the Three Colours trilogy, it's hard to think of a trilogy in which they all land absolutely perfectly. And I did, cynically, I have to say, go in thinking this is just happening because it's, it's going to be economically viable. It's going to work out. And the film began, and at the beginning, I did have a real sense of retreading old ground. We have the old friends, but now with Bonnie, and we see riffs that we've seen before, once favoured toys left behind in the cupboard, dealing with the fact that they're no longer in favour, young child going to kindergarten, sense of all those things that had been dealt with so brilliantly in Toy Story 1, 2 and 3. And I confess that for, that opening movement, I thought, okay, this is fine. It's Toy Story, but where are we going? And then there is the thing that Bonnie goes to the kindergarten where she makes a new friend. Literally, she makes a new friend. She gets a spork, which is a Foon and Spork thing, and some pipe cleaners. And she builds this thing called Forky. And Forky is brought home. She's the new friend that he's made. And Forky is then in the company of the toys and is alive. But Forky thinks he's trash. So Forky wants to jump in the trash bin, and Woody has to stop Forky from doing it because Woody understands that Forky is now the best friend of their child, the kid. When they say their child in Toy Story, it means the child. And so there's a very kind of interesting existential argument going on there about, okay, what does it mean to be a toy? What does it mean to be something that was constructed from trash? You're not made in a factory, therefore you're, at what point? So there is an interesting existential question there. And then a little bit further down the line, through that old device of a road trip, there is a meeting up with an acquaintance from previous films, and suddenly the film finds its feet. And I don't want to say much more about the plot, because always the whole thing about Toy Story, you'll see from trailers, but, in the end, this doesn't come down to plot. What it comes down to is there is a moment, and remember I spoke about with Mary Poppins Returns, there is a moment when they sing Where the Lost Things Go, okay? There is a moment in Toy Story 4 when it suddenly went bang, and I thought, oh, fine. And then I was back in a Toy Story movie. And then it was working its magic, and it was doing all the things that I wanted it to do. It was making me laugh, it was making me cry, it had moments of poignancy, it had moments of horror. It has characters that you would think of as being from the Anthony Hopkins magic. Really? Scary mannequins. Okay. It has a string pull doll whose voice box doesn't work anymore or is faulty and has never known love, and has a big smiley face that's really, really creepy and scary. And some of it takes place in an antique shop that's very much like an old British horror movie, and some of it takes place at a carnival, a kind of fairground, which is very bright and shiny, but also sort of quite alarming. And all those things that you've grown to know and love through Pixar in terms of the way in which the animation is delivered. There's times that the photorealist animation is quite astonishing. Things like rain. Things that, I have to remind myself, wow, look at that rain, look at that surface, look at the way that the hair is falling. Because when Toy Story was made, I remember seeing it. It was like a kind of almost hallucinogenic experience, because we hadn't really seen that kind of 3D computer animation before. And I still think Toy Story looks brilliant, but there are many, many moments in Toy Story 4 when I thought, wow. You just remind yourself that what you're looking at is a digital creation of animators at the very, very cutting edge of what it's possible to do with this design. And it goes right through Uncanny Valley and comes out into something which is much more eerie and immersive, because it's like a kind of hyper-real dream state. And then I realized that the movie was doing all those things, but also what it was doing was it had found a new venture. And I think the new venture is this. The way the narrative goes, in terms of 1, 2, and 3, they are really all about children and their parents. As that email from Gary,
Gary in Edinburgh.
So beautifully said. It's actually about, we are the toys. It's our fear of abandonment as children. And it's also about children, and that's what 1, 2, and 3 are about. And I do feel that 4 is not the conclusion of that arc. 4 is another thing. And I think that the reason that it works is because the other thing about it is this. I think Toy Story 4, and not everyone will agree with this, I think Toy Story 4 is the first Toy Story movie that's actually about the toys. That's not about children and parents, although that's all going on in it. But it's fundamentally about what it means to exist and what it means to be alive. I mean, and these questions aren't even sort of obliquely referred to. They're actually quite fundamentally referred to. And I started thinking, well, that's really interesting. It's the first Toy Story film that is about the toys and what it means to be obsolete yet self-determined, and what it means to be conscious. Now, of course, none of that makes any difference while you're watching the film. It all occurs afterwards on the train and in the days afterwards. And in fact, immediately afterwards, I came out and spoke to a fellow film critic who had felt the same as I did, that there was a point in which it waited to take off, and then it did take off. And I was saying that, what's interesting is that all anyone will remember is after it's taken off, because that's what you then get in mind. And it's important to remember that at the beginning things are a bit sticky. But actually what I really want to do is go back and watch that beginning again in terms of what the film then turned into. Because the more I think about it, the more I think it does have a validity in and of itself. Because when I was watching it, I was thinking of Steven Spielberg's AI, and I was thinking of, Super Toys Last All Summer Long. And I was thinking of those things which, in a way, very specifically, 1 to 3 are not about. I mean, they are about it, but they're not centrally about it. And so, yes, they've managed to... That said, I don't... When Sir Tom, Lord, your O'Queen, said, who knows if that's the end, there's a part of me that literally wanted to go, please stop.
Except, from what you're saying, it sounds as though it's the beginning of a
no, I think
type of story.
No, I think it is a standalone in and of itself, which is what he was saying about it. But I think it's done now, and I
thought it was done last time.
I know, and I was, yeah, but they got away with it, and it's really good, and it has a validity all of its own, and in so many ways, like all Toy Story movies, it's wonderful. I just don't want the risk again.
It's cost you too much.
So it's cost me too much. So in the best possible sense, hooray, well done. Now stop.
Step away.